Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the next session of Ask Masters. Today we have two prominent CAs of the CA fraternity, CA Murli Mohan Bhatt and CA Sumit Rathi. Welcome, sir.
Good evening, Sodhamini, and
Good
good
evening,
evening
sir.
to all the viewers of Masters India.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Personally, for me, this session is very special because I'm with my mentor, CA Murli Mohan Bhatt, and it has been a pleasure and a great association while we have worked together for today's session. So let's not waste more time and directly start with the session. Before that, let me introduce our speakers to you all. CA Mulli Mohan Bhatt is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants since 1999. So more than 22 years now, he's in this practice. It's our honor that you are with us, sir, to share your knowledge today.
Thank you,
CA Sumit
Sodhamini.
CA Sumit Rathi has having half a decade of experience in indirect taxes. For the ones who are a part of the CA profession would know how difficult it is to crack a CA exam. And CA Sumit Rathi has actually helped students by authoring handbooks on information system control audit and indirect taxes for CA final students. So you have really helped students in a great way. Welcome to our
Thank you,
session.
Sodhamini. Thank you.
Okay. So let's start.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure that this wonderful on Diwali, just after Diwali, that you have chosen this topic because this topic of accounting and records has some close connection with Diwali also. During Diwali, we used to have the third day or the fourth day Lakshmi Puja. When we knew, earlier days, we used to keep most of the businesses used to keep their accounting books and records and worship it and open a new kata. Those days of Chopra has now been replaced with the laptop. So we put a tilak on the laptop and hope and pray that our books and records will be maintained, are properly maintained, and there is no, I mean, server, issues, and it is not get data is not lost anywhere. So that way, just after the Diwali season, when the new summer year 2077 has started, it's apt that you have chosen this topic.
Yes. So, sir has already given us an introduction of the topic. The topic for today is GST in accounting. So, we all know we have to pay taxes, and GST is one among them. So, when money is going out, it has to be recorded in the books. That's the reason we have selected this topic of recording this GST which will be paid. So, can one of you throw light more about why is it important to connect GST and the books of accounts?
Yes, because again, maintenance of books, the records, whatever is that, is not just mandatory, but it's also beneficial to the SSAs, especially those who are registered, because though most of them we think that the accounts is tedious, unwanted process. It is always accounting expenditure is always treated as a debit to your P&L, which does not give any value addition by many businesses. But actually, it is other way around. When you maintain your books properly, you are able to at least pay your taxes correctly. Second thing is, claim your credits, especially input tax credits and refunds under the GST law. It's very critical which refunds you can claim and which credits you can not claim. And the third point is, so when maintaining proper accounts will also avoid penalties and the prosecutions. So I would suggest that it's more like a guns and roses. If you do your maintain your accounts and records properly in a true and correct manner, as per section 35 and rule 56, which my colleague will explain the technicalities of it. But if you can maintain these accounts properly, then you'll definitely the value addition is going to be there for the business, and therefore especially it is important from the point of say having saving your peace of mind, I mean saving your time and having a peace of mind that proper records are being maintained. In the context of GST, especially certain modifications will have to be done, which we will discuss over the course of this session.
Okay. Okay, so when you mentioned about it being very important that we maintain the right kind of records. So when we maintain our books of accounts, what are the different kinds of records, registers, or ledgers that need to be maintained to record the GST?
Yeah, Sumit can take it.
So, yes, yes. So, as Murli sir has just touched upon the sections, so Section 35 of CGST Act, with Rule 56 discusses about the records that needs to be maintained under GST provision. So, primarily 5 records is what we look at. So, records on production, on manufacturing of goods, inward and outward register, ITC register, output tax register, and stock register. So these are the primary registers prescribed under the Act. But Rule 56 also gives elaborate what all things to be maintained and how it has to be maintained. So basically, as Sir told, it has to be complete and it should give true and correct picture of the transaction. So anything with regard to invoicing, delivery, challenge, receipt voucher, asking related transaction, related transaction, all those have to be maintained and it has to be complete. For example, let's say there is a destruction of stock in the premises. So generally, my stock register would have inward, outward, and how much I have used for production. But when there is a stock which is destroyed, when it is there in the premises, my register should have detail of that. So for example, there is a movement of register stock from one branch to another branch. So when I look at it as a entire company as a whole, I may not have to show the stock transfers for the purpose of the accounting purpose. But when it comes to, it may not have financial impact because it's a movement of stock from one branch to another branch. But for the GST purpose, I should have 2 records at different location, and it should be complete to say that movement has happened from one branch to another branch. So records has to be GST number wise, every state wise, the records has to be maintained and it has to be giving full information. From the angle of accounting perspective, if we have to say, then it has to have the details ledgers, the primary ledgers, which we can say from the books of accounts, what needs to be maintained is output related ledger, input distributor related ledgers, and TDS, TCS related ledgers, electronic credit ledger and cash ledgers. So these are the primary records and ledgers which needs to be maintained in the GST. Yes, Solomon.
So, when you're saying this, there's one question which I'm having in mind, that when we are maintaining books of accounts, generally, we have to follow the guidelines as per the accounting standards, or the conventions which are mentioned, principles like which are traditionally followed. Then I'm sure there may be some clash between the GST laws and these accounting standards which are predefined. Uh, do you all think there are such type of clashes, and if yes, how can what are these clashes basically?
Yeah, normally in India, ICAP, what we say, what you said, the general accepted accounting practices and procedures that we do. There are 2 types of accounting standards. That is AS, what we say, and for certain listed entities and those above 250 crores net worth, they follow the Ind AS principle or the IFRS based accounts. So the primarily the books will be maintained as per that. However, certain differences, significant differences, we need to know so that when this aspect of GST, especially for the purpose of GST returns and assessment is concerned, you need to take care of these things. Just to throw a few lights on a few accounting standards, like you have now, for example, a few of the examples. I think our my colleague has already talked about the inter stock between transfers, stock transfers between one office to another office could be treated as a turnover purpose of GST. But in your books, we are going to show it as a inter-branch transactions. So similarly, when it comes to the financial statements or accounting gaps, what we have been seeing, there are a few points that you need to keep note of. Like for example, AS1, Accounting Standard 1, which talks about disclosure of accounting policies. Earlier, any taxes or duties, especially excise duties, which are related to manufacture, we used to club it along with the revenue. Whereas under GST, it is shown as a separate tax liability. Mostly, it is in the balance sheet, and then we, as in when it is paid, we take it out. If you talk about AS2 or the inventory valuation standards, so there again for the purpose of cost, we include along with the purchase prices the taxes to the extent the credit is not available. Now, generally we think that when we do the first method of accounting, wherein the GST is kept as separately as a liability item in the balance sheet, so we tend not to add this valuation for the purpose of valuation. But however, under GST, there are certain credits which cannot be availed of. So such unavailed credits needs to be added while doing the computation for inventory evaluation also. Similarly, trade discounts. Now, for example, trade discounts for the purpose of disclosure, we used to deduct it from purchase price and show, because as per accounting standard 2 itself, it says that purchase cost does not include trade rebates and trade discounts. So these will be netted and we to show the net amount. So for the purpose of GST, we need to have separately the purchase, because the GST is going to be charged on that value. About trade discounts, we can discuss a little later. Similarly, AS9 or AS7 for contractors, percentage of accounting standard for contracts, and AS9 revenue recognition, and similarly in AS 115 for the IFRS based standards. In these cases versus GST, the time at which the sale gets or revenue gets recognized is going to be determined. Now, for the purpose of accounting standards, normally risks and rewards, we say, when the risk and rewards relating to that goods or service passes, that is the time at which it is accounted as accounted as a revenue. However, for the GST, there is a supply rules when the invoice is raised or when payments received, even advance payments also we may have to pay GST. So these points you need to keep in mind when especially the different frameworks are involved. I would say more so in respect of Ind AS, because there the concept of fair valuation is also there, which is not there in GST. If you talk specifically about fixed assets, again, there will be a lot of assets wherein you can't claim credit. For example, in GST we have the works contracts and relating to immovable property, you can't claim a credit, and then you have motor vehicles. So such credit where credit cannot be taken, it will be considered to the part of the cost of the asset itself as per the accounting standards also. When a sale of an asset takes place, again, there could be substantial differences. As far as AS11 exchange rate is concerned, the rate which is considered for GST purpose and accounting could be there could be substantial differences. As per accounting standard, we go by the normal RBI reference rate, whereas here separate rules are there. In case of government grants, again, certain grants we take the revenue into consideration, whereas in GST those will be excluded. And similarly, wherever any consideration is paid by somebody else, for the purpose of GST, we don't consider those related credits also. Important point to note is AS 18 related party transactions. There is a specific rule GST in GST rule 28, which talks about how to do valuations. So it will not be the book's value or recorded value. It has to conform to the GST rule. So in certain cases, even when there is no monetary consideration, like for example, a corporate guarantee given by your holding company to its subsidiary company, could also attract the GST. So in such cases, these non-monetary considerations normally we don't bring it into the books at all, like contingent liabilities, contingent assets, and all. But from the perspective of a GST specific, you will have to look into these rules and bring it out. Warranty and provisions in AS 37, used to make a provision for warranty if at the time of the sale itself. Whereas as per GST, my colleague is going to touch upon this further. So this way, depending upon the gap, there could be a lot of differences. You have to keep a note of these things.
Okay. Okay. Before we continue, we have a question here where I would like to tell you all that the session will be beneficial to everyone who has to maintain books of accounts because the element of GST is going to come for everyone. So we hope the session is going to be useful for you. In case our viewers have got any questions, you all can drop it in the chat box. We will pick it up at the end of the session and we will try to answer all the questions. Okay, so proceeding with what Murli sir spoke. So when you spoke about the Ind AS and AS and the procedures, you mentioned about the credit, that's the input tax credit, ITC. Now, the concept of ITC is always a concern because we don't know how much credit is to be taken or how much should not be taken. So, I believe that if we maintain the right type of books, if we maintain the right type of ledgers or registers, we will be able to track how much credit is possible, how much credit is not possible. So which are these specific ledger accounts or registers that can be maintained to track the ITC payments and the ITC available?
So basically, ITC is a very important topic under indirect tax. More precisely, what we see in the recent past, the major frauds in GST is happening on this count. Okay, so Section 16 of CGST Act speaks about input credit and its eligibility. So there are 4 conditions which is specified under Section 16. Okay, so one is that taxpayer should have a valid document, supply should have been completed, tax should have been paid, and returns have been filed. So these 4 conditions, what has been specified in the Section 16, we should have sufficient document. Any taxpayer should have sufficient document to substantiate that all the conditions are satisfied. So he should have a valid document of inventory, the supply, inward supply, maybe the invoice or debit note or a valid document with proper GST numbers and all those things, whatever is specified in the rules. Then the proof of movement of material may be e-waybill or stock inward document, or any other transportation document. So those documents should be in place. In case of services, what can be done is to take a proof of completion of certificate from the service provider. So these are the important documents which would be required. Apart from that, for payment of tax, what is suggested is that one is that you make a payment to the vendor. That is the proof that you have made a payment to the vendor. But whether vendor has paid to the deposited to the government or not is something which has to be ensured. So the liability, while it is a litigatable matter, it's a debatable matter that how do I as a service recipient or the inward supply recipient keep a control on somebody else's payment of tax. But what is suggested is maybe at the year end, or if some transactions are happening for one-time transactions kind of thing, one should have an affidavit or a document signed from the service provider or the goods provider that he is deposited the tax. And similarly, the tax, what is been deposited is appearing in GSTR2A through GSTR1. So these are the things which should be maintained. Apart from that, what needs to be maintained by a taxpayer is that within 180 days, the payment has happened to vendor. If not, have a track of it so that you are reversing your ITC. Okay, and this reversal happens through the ledgers also. So ledgers has to be very clearly maintained in the books so that to capture what ITC has come in respective CGST, SGST, IGST, or UTGST, RCM related ITC, TCS, TDS related ITC, and also one has to ensure that provisional ITC is very well insured and it is not being taken. Rule 36(4) compliance has to be in place, and compliance with regard to reversal on account of 180 days, or compliance in regard to not taking credit if any of the provision of Section 16 is not complied. Let's say, for example, material is received but invoice is not received, or invoice is received, material is not received, then you should not be taking the credit. So those things has to be ensured. Sadanand, you are not audible. Yeah. Yes.
Yes. So when you talk about the provisional credit, is there some particular kind of an account which we can maintain so that this is recorded correctly?
Yes, very much. So Rule 36(4) speaks about provisional credit. If I have to be very precise, so it says that if I have to be using simple language, it is like 110% of eligible credit which is appearing in my 2A, that only is eligible for me to claim in my 3B. So it requires a lot of reconciliation. So what alternatively can be done is open a provisional ITC ledger in your books. Route entire ITC from that provisional ledger. So only after it appears in your 2A, then you transfer it to credit availed ledger. So that any moment in time, one will have details of what vendors, what credit is not appearing, and this will help not only to maintain your ITC, but also to follow up with vendor to know which vendor is filing your return properly. So this provisional ITC ledger is something which can be maintained in the records.
Okay. So
generally, we have seen accountants. Sorry. Generally, to add to what Sumita said, generally we have seen that accountants maintain one ledger for all the credits. So going forward, I think better you have separate ledgers where credits are appearing and where so that you can follow up and get the credit, and then this is what Sumita was trying to say.
Yes.
So based on what you are telling, I understand that this rule 36 subsection 4 is like a blessing. We can actually maintain a separate account where we can claim the right credit at the right time
Yes.
and not miss out on anything basically.
Yes. Yes. Very much.
So right now we are maintaining so many ledgers and so many books. For how long are we supposed to maintain these books?
See,
Under the GST Act, it depends upon the different purpose. Companies Act says 8 years and this. But for specifically for GST Act purpose, it is 72 months from the due date of the annual return. Now, normally annual return are supposed to be filed by December of the subsequent year. So from that, it is 6 years. But we are seeing now for 18-19, the annual return is that was December. So in that case, automatically it gets extended up to that date. And similarly, there are certain other provisions where you go on appeal or there is a disposal, etc. Then till that disposal of the 1 year from the end of the disposal of that case, you need to maintain it. And these records, wherever it is either physical or electronic, needs to be. You can maintain it electronically also, provided it conforms to these rules.
That's what I was going to ask, because we are right now in the digital era. So instead of keeping bulky paper documents, can we keep this in an electronic format, and it is valid?
Yes. 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 It is valid. It is very much valid. Rules also prescribes for this. Only thing is that logs has to be maintained if there is any editing or any alteration which happens, and it has to be digitally attested and available at any time. It should be retrievable one.
Okay.
So even if it is a purchase note or a sale note, for example, then it has to be digitally signed by it. Only then it will be treated as a valid document.
Yes.
So right now when you are talking about notes, I remembered a question which was asked in our previous session. So we had a question which spoke about warranties and discounts. So basically the situation was, say my product is under warranty and I go to replace it. Now the company will give me a replacement. Now what is the GST treatment for the company when they are replacing a product which is under warranty, or there is a sales returns in the warranty period?
Okay. 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 So the warranty and guarantee goes as a composite supply, if I have to say, use the word. So generally what happens is, let's say if you are purchasing a laptop, there's a warranty which is attached to it for 1 year, right? So there's no separate price which is charged for it. It is composite pricing that has been offered to you, and you give a single price and you take a laptop with warranty. Sometimes you take extended warranty by paying some additional amount, but you purchase it at the time of purchasing the laptop itself. So at time 0, you have to purchase the warranty. And as per the agreement, anything happens out of the prescribed thing, anything happens, it will be replaced, or it will be rectified by the provider, the goods provider. This particular thing is already covered at the time 0, at the time of supply. The warranty has been covered, taxes has been paid. There will be no other tax asset treatment if there is any supply in the time frame of warranty. However, if there is any additional charge, which is collected by the service provider or the goods provider, that additional charge is subject to GST. And movement of goods would happen with a bill of supply. So there will be no taxes if there is a bill of supply, and with that, movement of goods will happen if the the quantum of or the materials which are of high value. Let's say, for example, if it is something a wind turbine, and which is coming with the warranty. So wind turbine, some of the products will be in crores. So how that material movement has to happen with the bill of supply and with the e-way bill, but there will be no GST implication on that asset.
And then what about the e-invoicing aspect to it?
See, e-invoicing aspect will come if at the time of supply. So when the supply has happened, that time e-invoicing is done. So at the time 0, when time of supply, e-invoicing is done. When the movement of goods is happening, there's no other supply, so there's no invoicing required. And for bill of supply, it's not mandatory for e-invoicing. E-invoicing covers only invoice, debit note, credit notes.
Okay. So I think we have questions for this particular topic, but I think we'll take it at the end of the session. So I have another question here when we talk about these things. So basically, right now when we are talking about books of account, we are talking about GST. We talk about income tax. Income tax is a direct tax. GST is an indirect tax.
Yes.
But recently, I got to read about details about the GST returns being visible in the 26 AS. So there is an interplay between the Income Tax Act and the GST laws. So what is this relationship? Like, what is this relationship?
In fact, I remember, one nation, one tax when they announced in 2017, many people thought, income tax itself is also not going to be that. Unfortunately, yes, as rightly we all know that, income tax is a direct tax on the profits you make, and whereas GST is an indirect tax, so it is collected on the sales that you make and then remitted on behalf of the buyer to the government by the seller. Okay, so this interplay now, especially though there was an MOU earlier, especially now since July, there has been a memorandum of understanding between the CBDT and CBIC. Because of this memorandum, now there is a seamless data. In fact, they have formed a separate group because of the data flow between the two departments. What we were seeing, that is, that of course there is going to be some natural differences between what the turnover is declared in GST and what turnover is coming in your income tax returns. But at least, there were cases where, crores together turnover was declared in GST but not coming here. In fact, you will be surprised to know one more interesting aspect that, from 2017 till September 2020, there have been 20,233 cases of GST evasion worth 93,642 crores. Okay, so in most of these cases, almost I would say 75 to 80% relates to fraudulent invoices. So these invoices were just for the purpose of GST issue. Somebody claims a credit, whereas it is not getting recorded at all, or is not paying the taxes on this. So such cases of major variations could be picked up. I do understand, especially unless they come out with a particular format, maybe in the next years we'll be seeing the reconciliation between the GST turnover, and already Form 9 in the GST has it, where we need to reconcile with the financial records, financial turnover, what is shown in the books. So this year now, for all income tax assessees who are having income from business and filing ITR 3 or in ITR forms 6 for companies, in both these cases, they need to give what was the reported turnover as per GST 3. They are not asking you to reconcile the two, but where there could be huge variations, I'm pretty sure they're going to send the income tax department is going to ask for the reasons for these variations and ask you to explain. So right from the beginning, if you have the monthly reconciliations or because again the income tax is yearly, so though the data what they are showing in the 26 years is now monthly, if you can make a monthly reconciliation and keep it handy, so that as and when the notice comes, you can always explain for it. That should not be an issue at all.
So basically, I take this as if you have a reason for the differences, then we are well sorted. We should be sure of why are the differences.
Correct. And also another aspect related to this is the tax auditor, especially those chartered accountants who are having now 44, where there is a turnover above 1 crore and above, and you are having tax audit cases. So in such cases, there was in the tax audit report form 3CD clause 44. I think was introduced about 2 years back, which said specifically that you need to give what is the GST related expenditure that you incur, what is non-GST related, what is composition related, and all this information was asked for. But again, it has been deferred for current year also. So probably from next year onwards, once all this information is available, they will themselves be, or the system, the data analytics systems will be able to match and throw up those cases where it is there. It's all aimed at having a transparent taxation system wherein you honor the honest taxpayer and punish the dishonest. That should be the aim of any taxation, whether it's direct or indirect.
I get that. So right now, when we are talking about these two kinds of the direct taxes and the indirect taxes, you told about we need to be sure about why there is a difference. You mentioned about the clause 44 of Form 3CD. Is there anything that can be done, anything else which can be done if there is a mismatch?
See, basically, maybe I'll just take this question. So basically,
Yeah.
So generally, there should not be any mismatch. Ideally, that is ideal situation, but that is ideal situation is normally not to occur. Okay, so it is like GST assessment versus this. If we say any assessment for that matter, I call that assessment is nothing but matching the mismatch. Okay, so that matching the mismatch has to be done at self-assessment level itself. Okay, so there could be differences, but if, as sir rightly told, that if we have reconciliation for the differences, if we have valid reason for the differences, no assessment order can be passed without giving an opportunity of being heard, and nothing can be concluded. In fact, recently advanced ruling which has come from Andhra Pradesh, right? Andhra Pradesh advanced ruling, Sri Kali Krishna Industries. So wherein it says that mismatch can be there, but it should not be a mere reason for taking any aggressive action or penalty provisions on the taxpayer. So let there be mismatch. Let us not lose our sleep, right? Let's not have sleepless nights. But at least let us have valid documents. Let us have valid reconciliation. If still there's a mismatch, let us report it, pay the taxes, and then have a proper night's sleeps.
Okay.
Yeah, wherever there is a mistake found, better to rectify the mistake yourself voluntarily rather than wait for the department to send the notices and lose your peace of mind later.
I get that, yes. So, sir, when you mentioned about the assessment being a way to correct the mismatches, but under GST, there are different kinds of assessments which are actually possible.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something more about that?
See, assessments are covered. Basically, 6 types of assessments are there in GST. I would say 5+1. So one is self-assessment, which is nothing but I assess my income, I assess my taxes, and file the return. Then provisional assessment, scrutiny assessment, assessment of non-filer, unregistered persons assessment, and summary assessment. So these are the various type of assessments. Self-assessment is something which I assess. Provisional assessment is when I'm not able to assess my taxes. I go to the officer and I ask, I'm not able to assess my taxes. Please, can you assess and ask me what taxes that I should pay? So this is how it happens. So other 4 assessments, which is scrutiny, summary, non-filers, and unregistered persons assessment, there, whatever documents on record which is there with the tax officer, he will send a notice to the taxpayer or the person. Against that notice, we should give the documents and proof saying that this is what you have assessed, this is what it should be. If there's a difference, you should have a reason and documents to mitigate that particular difference. You should be able to bridge it. If not, then there'll be an order issued with the demand. So that's how it works. Yeah, primarily for assessments, I think now that so far assessments have just started in some parts after the GST audit reports for 18-19s are filed and all. But one should be ready with assessment on a regular basis, according to me, as also Melissa touched upon it, that you cannot wait for assessment to come to start preparing your records and reconciliation. Unlike in VAT, what we used to do is once the assessment comes, that time we'll prepare what is there, or under the audit time we will prepare and then keep it. That cannot happen in GST. GST requires a lot of reconciliation. It requires a lot of documentation. Everything should be in place. More precisely, for example, FIRCs, invoice, debit notes, related party transaction, deemed supply is something which has to be there in place. You cannot escape it. And reconciliation of outward, inward. So a lot of documents is required. So for to be assessment ready, let's start today. You can't wait for assessment to come. That time your taxpayer, the tax consultants will have various other assessments going on. So that will become a sleepless night that time.
Okay.
And you only have 30 days time to reply for a notice. You will not get the luxury of time.
Okay. That's a point I think we should note, that the time available to reply to a notice is very limited.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we are shooting time. So I have one more question which was asked basically. So on 10th of November, the CBIC has released around 8 notifications.
Yes.
And I believe that this is going to impact the bookkeeping process and the GST return filing process to some extent for sure.
Very much.
One major notification change which has come, relates to e-invoicing. So this e-invoicing was earlier mandatory only for those above 500 crores. Again, this is related to what I talked about, the fraudulent invoices that are being issued related to, as a corrective measure, they have done it. So now from 1st January 2021, all registered persons with a turnover of more than 100 crores also will have to abide by this. And a few changes in GST returns and tax payments, maybe Sumit, you can just briefly touch upon.
So yes, one major thing is on the invoicing. Another one is for the small taxpayer. So right now everybody is filing monthly returns of returns. When I say 3P returns and paying the taxes and all, So to avoid that compliance burden to some extent, new provision as far as making this as a quarterly return has come in place from 1st of January. So one can, with a turnover below 5 crore, can opt for a quarterly GSTR 3B return filing. So in this, taxes has to be paid in advance. So 35% of your last quarter's tax, whatever is there, you pay in advance. And if there is any tax liability which you feel like it is going to be more, you can pay it. It will go and sit in your cash ledger. So right now, what provision says is tax payment has to happen. The amount which is there sitting in cash ledger might not be considered as a payment. But with the new provisions or new notification, in the quarterly return, if my payment is gone and it is sitting in the cash ledger also, it will be considered as payment. When I file the return, it will knock off my liability. So this will create one more ledger in the books, right? So there will be something which is going and sitting in your cash ledger, you should have one more ledger. And you should have this reconciliation also.
Okay.
So yeah, to that extent, all the records has to be updated. And apart from that, other notifications were with regard to extension of dates and all those things. I don't think that would be
that invoice furnishing facility has been extended now, no?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So invoice furnishing facility is also for the quarterly GSTR filing.
Okay, so this has been a really insightful session. Like we have answered so many questions in 30 minutes, and we have few more questions from our viewers. I'll read out the questions. You all can pick it up as convenient. So the first question is: if the entity is opting for presumptive taxation under the Income Tax Act, is it necessary for the entity to maintain books of accounts as per GST in case of a proprietary concern?
Yeah, now you have to keep in mind that the provisions of income tax are different, provisions of GST are different. So if the Act mandates that under the Section 44 AD you can declare 8% of your turnover without maintaining books of account. But for the purpose of GST Act, the CGST, whatever the books they are prescribed, you have to maintain it. You don't have a choice really there.
So I understand that they will have
to add. There are some cases where, like, if you are a transporter, warehouse keepers, and all, even if you are not registered, there are some records which has to be maintained. So we should not confuse direct tax versus indirect tax. So yes, sir, like rightly touched upon that.
Okay. So to summarize that means they will have to maintain the books of accounts for the GST purposes.
Right. Otherwise, it will be difficult for you to, prove your records.
Okay. So I hope we have answered your question, Mr. Vijay Kumar. Next, we have a question from Mr. Vikas. He says whether we would not be deferring our input credit if we keep separate ledger, whether GST provision does not permit availment of credit even if not appearing in the portal on the basis of invoices and other documents.
So Rule 36(4) restricts you there, right? So what Rule 36(4) says, as we discussed about it, is whatever is your eligible credit, 110% of that, what is appearing in, so it says that if I have to read the wordings, it says credit which is not reflecting in 2A, 10% of what is reflecting in 2A, eligible credit, can only be taken. So if you have valid invoice, it is not appearing in 2A, only to the extent of 10% of what is reflecting in 2A is what you can take. Yes, there is a deferment. Yes, it is something which can be debated. In fact, Rule 36(4) has been, it is there, it has been challenged. The constitutional validity of it has been challenged. But with the current standing provisions, it is not possible. What is appearing in 2A is what you should be taking. In fact, I feel that this is how it should be going. Whatever is reflecting in 2A, you just take that much credit. Don't go for even 10% off if the amount is not that significant, because it will create confusion in reconciliations. So better to, if you are just taking credit, it is going and sitting in your electronic credit ledger. Why to take it? Why to create unnecessary, manners involved in reconciliation? Rather, you don't take it. You take it when it is reflecting.
Okay, so we hope your question is answered, Mr. Vikas. Next, we have a question from Mr. Om Prakash Sharma. The question is relating to e-invoicing. Do we need to raise e-invoice at the time of dispatch of the goods, or we can raise it later? If later, is there any timeline?
See, e-invoicing is not a substitute of your normal invoicing. So it is what normal invoice, what we need to raise. It is same thing which is gone on e-invoicing. So invoice in case of sale of goods has to be raised before dispatch or at the time of dispatch. There's no later. It has to be raised when you are dispatching your material. It has to go with that e-invoicing with the barcode, with IRN. It has to go, otherwise your material will be seized in the transit.
No, I think for the time being, they have given that time where you can generate it later and
That
give
was
that
only for
reference
October
number,
month.
invoice reference number later.
Yeah, that was only for October month. So
Yeah.
October month
November
there
they
was
have
a
not
1 month.
extended.
Yeah. So that's not extended. But going forward, it is not going to be like you can generate it later. It's not like compliance की GSTR 1 में हम लोग जैसे file करते हैं. That's how we can file it after we have done the dispatch the material. No, that is not how it is going to be. You have to raise
At
your
least it is not
invoice.
intended that way. The whole system is to ensure that you invoice and then only send the goods.
Yes.
So the process is very simple as you raise the invoice in your in-house system and then submit it to the IRP, which will generate the IRN and the QR code and send it back to you.
Correct.
Yeah. So, okay. So I hope your question is answered, Mr. Om Prakash Sharma. Next, we have another question from Mr. Sarvesh Shah. How do we address the GST invoice and delayed payments?
So I'm not able to get the question when you say address the GST invoice. Delayed payment is something which maybe I'm understanding that delayed payment from the customer to the vendor. Is that the question? Maybe if a little bit clarity is there on the question, it will be easy to answer. Or it is on the delayed payment of, okay, so it is delayed payment from the customer to vendor. Okay. So that's where section 16 comes into play. Section 16 says that 180 days is the timeline within which the payment has to be made. Otherwise, the credit will not be allowed for the recipient. So if payment is not made within 180 days, you need to see that the credit, the person counterpart cannot take the credit. That's all. Otherwise,
Yeah,
on the
unfortunately,
payment,
the
how do I get
system.
the payment? That is something which is
No, unfortunately, the system does not permit you not to pay it. So, irrespective of whether he gets credit or not, you unfortunately have to remit this GST. I know this is going to be a cash flow problem, especially in these times when people are going to delay these payments. But the system is that way as of now.
Okay. Hope we have answered your question. Would you like to add something, sir?
No, that's what. In such case, for payment recovery, you need to approach Civil Court.
Okay, we need to see the. Okay, great. So we'll wait for another minute if anyone has more questions, or else we will wind up. Okay.
Sure.
There's one more question. Late filing fees paid twice, 20,000 each during March 2020 while closing books. Should I carry extra payment as refundable or amount with government authorities?
So, okay. So there are two questions involved in it. One is that how do I record my transaction in my books? Second is what should happen for that extra what has been paid. So this what has been paid extra, you can go for a refund. So tax paid in extra. So you can go for excess payment of tax or excess payment of fee. You can go for refund of it. And till you get the refund for your financial purpose, yes, it is a payment which is there with the government authority. The amount with the government, that's where you are going to classify it.
Amount with the government authorities. That's how it's going to be classified as. Yes. Okay. Okay. Great. Any more questions? I think we have crossed our time because we have had a great session. We have had wonderful audience asking us wonderful questions and actually being attentive. And I'm seeing there is a good attendees list as well. Okay. So as we have short time, I will wind up for the day. In case you all have any questions, as a Diwali bonus, you all could say, our speakers have curated a handbook for you all on this topic. So you all will get it as an email probably by tomorrow. And this recorded version of this session also will be available. You all will receive as an email. All the registrants will receive it as an email. Plus, it will be available on Masters India's social media channels. So you all can view it from there as well. As the closing remarks, Mulli sir and Sumit sir, would you all like to say something?
Yes, Sudha, many thanks for this initiative. I hope you keep doing this as knowledge sharing. We spread awareness and we keep sharing this knowledge amongst many more people. The culture of taxation that is required in India will come into place very soon. And on a lighter note, today being International Men's Day, I would suggest. I mean, of course, you have been a wonderful host here, and I just wanted to end up in a lighter note that there are two things that a man cannot understand. One is obviously what his wife is saying. You always take it, you don't understand what she's saying. And second is the GST law, because by the time you understand the GST law, the government has passed a new notification and something else has come in. So that's on a lighter note.
Yes.
So you need to keep having more such talk shows often. That is what I wanted to say.
And I hope we can have a talk show again on another topic sometime.
Sure.
Sumit sir, would you like to say something?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sudhamini, for having us here. And it is wonderful for me to share the platform with Murli sir, and to speak on this particular topic. And that, as sir told, rightly, that immediately after Diwali, the account is something which is closer to everybody, all the accountants, chartered accountants. Account is something which is our core. And then when we are talking GST and accounts, it's really interesting talking to me when I have heard about this topic. And yeah, all the best for future sessions and all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, audience, for being a wonderful audience. We will keep you informed about our next session. Till then, be safe, be home. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.